Okay, so this is a reproduction. So you can see it's Opera Garnier House. And for us, French people, the Opera Garnier House is very symbolistic because during the war, the Opera House was really the place of the Nazis. And in the other side of the postcard, you can see the first names. The handwriting was very strange for us. We didn't recognize who wrote it. And as you can see, the stamp was upside down and a lot of strange details.
Hi, everyone. This is AJ Woodhams, host of the War Books podcast, where I interview today's best authors writing about war-related topics. Today, I am really excited to have on the show Anne Berest for her new novel, The Postcard. Anne is the best-selling co-author of How to Be Parisian Wherever You Are, and the author of a novel based on the life of French writer Francois Sagan. With her sister Claire, she is also the author of Gabrielle, a critically acclaimed biography of her great-grandmother. She's been profiled in publications like Vogue and Harrods, and she has received numerous literary awards. Her latest novel, The Postcard, which we're talking about today, was a finalist for the Goncourt Prize. Anne, how are you doing today?
Very well. I'm in Paris, in France.
I know you were just on an American tour, right? So you were in
Yes.
DC, New York,
Miami, San
Miami.
Francisco,
Oh, wow. All over.
Boston. It was an amazing book tour.
Oh, perfect. Well, so glad to have you on the show here today.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, no, really, it's my pleasure. It's like the greatest thing is I get to talk to really interesting authors about their books, and again, I really loved your book. I loved a lot of things about it. I loved how it alternated between past and present. I thought you did an excellent job there. Well, I guess in your words first, what would you say your book is about?
Okay. So, first of all, I want you and the listener to know that this novel is based on true facts and on events that happened to me and to my family. That's why I like to call the book a true novel. Because although it's written in a novelistic style, I didn't imagine anything. So, to make a long story short, the book starts in 2003 when my mother, Lelia, receives a postcard in her letterbox, a postcard mentioning only 4 first names: Ephraim, Emma, Noémie, and Jacques. No signature, no message, nothing. Just 4 first names that my mother recognizes immediately because they are the first names of her grandparents, uncle, and aunt, who she never met because they were murdered in a concentration camp during the Holocaust because they were Jews. So, in other words, these people died during the war, and 60 years later, someone sent a postcard with their first names, but this person wanted to remain anonymous. So the first question was who, and the second was why. And so that's how the book came to me. But if you agree, if you, I can show you the postcard. Give me 2 seconds,
Oh,
okay?
you have it? I would love to see it.
I have the reproduction of the postcard.
Yeah,
The real one is at my mother's home, but I will show it to you, okay?
I would love to see it.
Okay, so this is a reproduction. So you can see it's Opera Garnier House. And for us, French people, the Opera Garnier House is very symbolistic because during the war, during the occupation of Paris, it was a place where every night all the Nazis went to listen to music because they couldn't go to movies to watch movies or to theaters because of the language. So the opera house was really the place of the Nazis. And in the other side of the postcard, you can see the first names. The handwriting was very strange for us. We didn't recognize who wrote it. And as you can see, the stamp was upside down and a lot of strange details on the postcard. And
Wow.
and so we 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 had no idea of we didn't have the slightest clue so who might have sent it. So we were very uncomfortable with that object, and so that's why we put it away in a drawer, and we forgot about it. It wasn't until 15 years later that I decided to investigate with the help of my mother and with the help of a private detective and of a graphologist. And it's after 4 years that we finally solved the puzzle. So my books, if you want, tells the story of the journey and the discovery of the mystery.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you showed that postcard. You do. I mean, you do figure out, the reader will figure out who wrote the postcard in the book. But for me to see it right now, I was getting a little emotional with you holding it up because I felt like I've spent so much time in your book along this journey with you. So thank you for that. Well, let's talk then about kind of the historical part
Yeah,
of your book. So you structure it as a conversation between you and your mother,
yeah,
and you're narrating the events that happened to your family, which start in 1919 in
yeah,
Russia, the Rabinovich family, up to 1942 when they're killed in Auschwitz.
yeah.
Actually, I guess first, why did you choose to structure the historical part of the book as a story being told between mother and daughter?
I was intending my book to young people. I wrote it for the youth. I wanted it to be a book of transmission. It was a book for the new generation. So that's why I put myself in the shoes of someone who knows almost nothing about the war. Because I am the person in the book, I am the person who asks the questions on behalf of the reader. Because I wanted to be sure that if a teenager or if a young adult reads a book, he will understand everything. It was very important for me. It was my duty of transmission because I think that if a teenager enjoys a novel with an historical landscape, uh, one day that teenager or that young adult will open an history book to learn more. And for me, the novel is a gateway to history. It was my case. It's because I read novels that I loved with characters that I loved, which were historicals that I wanted to learn more about history. And so that's the first answer. The second answer is that, you know, the Jewish thought is a thought of questioning. In Jewish thought, it's more important to know how to ask a question properly than to know how to answer it. And so my character in the book, so as you said, it's a character who is always asking question to her mother. And my character is like one of the character of the Passover Haggadah. The Haggadah is a book that we read on the evening of Passover. And in this book, you have a child, and this child is the ignorant one. Okay? And he's the one who doesn't know. And it's very important because the one who asks questions allows others who perhaps didn't dare to ask the question to listen to the answer. And for those who know, maybe as a question asked will bring unexpected answers. That's why the book is a dialogue between my mother, who knows everything in the book, and me, who know nothing in the book. I am the ignorant one. Very important character.
Well, I love that. Two things actually about what you just said. That I thought that was such a good way to structure the book because then I learned too. I'm learning through your eyes all these new things that I didn't know, and yeah, that you're right. That is a very effective way to convey to the reader to so that they can learn a bit of history. The other thing, the first part of what you were talking about with reading historical novels as a teenager or whatever, that resonates so much with me because that's how I really got into history. There's an English author, Ken Follett,
Yeah,
who,
I know.
yeah, he wrote a book called Pillars of the Earth, and it's about cathedrals in medieval England. And when I was a teenager, I loved that book, and it got me so fascinated into that time period. You're so right that novels are such an excellent lens into the past, and for young people to get excited about the past. Well, let's dive into the history then of your book. So the Rabinoviches, if you can just start with them in 1919. So Ephraim and Emma are kind of the matriarch and patriarch, your great grandparents. What kind of people are they? What personalities are they? What are their personalities like? What are their children like? What's going on in 1919 for them?
So Ephraim was from Russia, Emma was from Poland, from Lodz. I will show you. I have a photography that's all the family in Lodz. And
Wonderful.
here you can see that's Miriam. That's my grandmother, the little girl with the white dress. And that's all the family. Here you see Ephraim. Here you see his wife, Emma. And that's cousins, aunt, uncles from the Rabinovich family and Wolf family, the two families together. And this photography was taken in 1924. And after the war, Miriam, my grandmother, she is the sole survivor of all the people of the photography.
Yeah. It was of a five-person family, the Rabinoviches. Only Miriam survives the
Yes,
Holocaust. Yeah.
all these persons were murdered. All the persons of the
Wow.
photo.
So everyone in that photograph except for
Yes,
Miriam died in the
yes,
Holocaust. That's
yes.
incredible.
So Ephraim was a very serious man. So an engineer, and he believed in progress. He believed in science. So they had three children, and Ephraim he had complete trust in France. For him, France was a country of enlightenment, the country of French Revolution. So we must not forget that after the French Revolution, France was the only country in Europe that granted Jews to have the same status as other citizens. And so France was considered as a paradise in all Europe for the Jews. And there was a Yiddish proverb saying, happy as a Jew in France. So that's why Ephraim and his family couldn't imagine a single second that the French government, the French state, would betray him. He had trust in France. He wanted to become a French citizen.
Yeah, and that ends up being a very important thing to him in the book is to get French citizenship.
Yes,
And I think too, he wants to do everything correctly when he's in France. He wants
yes,
to obey every law. He wants to be the model French
yes.
citizen.
He was the first to go to the police to be on the register. It was the first one. I saw the paper, the archive. Yes, he wanted to be a model.
Yeah, and I remember reading, so he was the when the Nazis invade France, he wanted to register first because that was to him, that's, what the French authorities would want him to do. Why do you think it was so important to Ephraim that he got French citizenship?
As I said, he thought that France was a paradise for Jews, and he thought that France was the safest place in Europe for Jews.
Hmm. Well, what was life like for Jews living in France after, so this is maybe the late, I forget which year they arrive in France exactly. They spend a little time getting there from Russia around Europe, but I
Yes,
think it's
it
the
is
early 1930s.
they are in at the end of the 20s.
So, what was life like for Ephraim and Emma when they first arrived in France? What hardships did they experience as Jews?
So they were foreigners, of course. So if it's always hard to be a foreigner in a country, but they were highly educated. They speak multiple languages, including French, even though they have an accent. And so in France, Ephraim continues his work as an engineer. Emma teaches piano lessons. They have three children. And so they want to be fully assimilated. They want their children to attend the best French schools. They want their daughters to be at the top of their class. They want to be assimilated.
What happens
Yes.
to Jews living in France when the Nazis invade? So this is 1940,
Yes.
and specifically, how does life change for Ephraim and Emma and Noemi and Miriam and Jacques?
They will gradually fall under the yoke of anti Semitic laws, and their family will be deported. But for me, I needed to understand that, that I needed to understand why they hadn't left, why they hadn't avoided danger, why they had gone to register with the police. It was an obsession for me. I wanted to understand exactly day by day how things had unfolded, because they were intelligent, they were cultured people. So I wanted to understand why they didn't see the signs. It was my obsession, and it was why I wrote the book.
Well, so the second part of your book takes place in modern times. So fast forwarding a bit, and also it just to make it clear for everybody here. So when your family is deported, so everybody except for Miriam, I believe, dies in Auschwitz. Is that correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So yeah. So after that happens, your book it fast forwards to modern times, and it starts part two of your book starts with a conversation between mother and daughter, just like part one, where it was between you and your mother. Now part two is a conversation between you and your daughter. So, why did you choose to do that? And what do you think your book says about trauma and motherhood?
I don't know. It's difficult for me to answer that question because it's up to the reader to tell me instead. But all I can say is that I wanted to write a book about transmission and about the idea of invisible transmission. The invisible transmission is one of the main themes of my book. I delve into the concept of how our ancestors survive within us, even when we have no knowledge about them, not even their first names. And I have read articles on cellular memory. I find fascinating that our cells in our body, in our blood, have a memory, and a memory of emotions spanning over. Scientists, they say that the memory of emotions span over three previous generations. And so it was fascinating for me, and it's a scientific way to explain that our ancestors still live in us, and it's a way to acknowledge that we still communicate and connect with our ghosts. That's what
Yeah.
I call the invisible transmission. For example,
Well, that's
uh,
mhm.
because when you are working on your family tree, you will discover a lot of strange coincidences. You will discover that, I don't know, your You live in a city where your great grandfather lived also, and you didn't know. You will discover that I don't know. You are an engineer, and your great uncle was also an engineer, and you didn't know. It's strange coincidences. And while writing my book, I discovered a lot of these invisible transmissions. And for me, it was like a gift. It was as if I were speaking with my ancestors.
That's so interesting that you say that, and I'm thinking about parts in your book where that happened. The first thing that comes to mind is with you and your daughter when she experiences anti-Semitism at school. You're very reluctant to bring that up to her. You hesitate
I'm
to
shocked.
talk. Yeah. Well, what do you think the cellular memory? Do you
Yes,
think that
yes,
is
it,
tied to it?
yes, I'm sure, because at that moment, when my mother called me, and she said to me, "You have to go at school. You have to ask the headmaster, the teacher, what happened at school. It's awful. You have to fix that problem." And I can't say anything. I can't even ask my daughter, just tell me what happened at school. Why do you say that people don't like Jews at school? What happened? And I was so shocked. And I understood after that it was because of a trauma over several generations. So the trauma is in my cells, and that's why I was in that shock.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that your book, so your own Jewish identity, is explored throughout the book, and you didn't grow up as a practicing Jew, if you want to put it like that. You did not grow up in a religious family, but of course, religion is very much tied to this story. There's a scene I'm thinking about in your book actually where you're with Georges, I think is his name, and his family, and they're religious. They're religious
Yes,
Jews, and they're kind of questioning you about
yes.
your Jewish identity. And then a woman says, "It sounds like you're only Jewish when it suits you." Talk a little bit about your Jewish identity and how that changed in your search for who wrote the postcard.
It changed a lot, because before writing this book, I never used to say that I was Jewish. Never. No, I have no problem saying it anymore. And I know what this word holds for me, what meaning it has. So it makes a big difference. But when you're writing a book, the book has to change you. If you are the same person before and after writing the book, it means that you had not worked enough.
Wow, I love that. I'm writing a novel myself right now, so I hope to have that same experience in writing my own book. I wonder then. So now that you've written this book, then are there? How do you see Judaism differently?
Yes, because now it's a part of me, and it's really a culture more than for me. I I met a culture more than a religion, and and I enjoy to learn more and day after day more about it.
Yeah. Well, a question, I guess, about just kind of thinking about your family and Jews in France in the 1940s, and kind of how your great grandfather Ephraim, how he really wanted to be a citizen,
Yeah.
and he was an immigrant to France,
Yes.
you know, and obviously, he was not protected by French society. I wonder, kind of thinking about modern day, when it comes to foreigners and immigrants, in what ways do you think society right now, in what ways do you think society is repeating some of the same mistakes that led up to World War II?
In French, we have an expression, comparaison n'est pas raison. It means that one must be very careful when comparing situations, especially in history. However, what is certain that is that mistakes are made. I don't know if mistakes are repeated, but mistakes are made today. And the problem is that when you have crises, economic crisis, financial crisis, it always raises racism. And you, human beings struggle to rid themselves of the fear of the other and of the foreigner. And that's very sad. So I don't know if I answered to your question, but it's difficult to answer to it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's very tough because, like you just said, it's so hard to compare because, yes, World War II is just so hard to compare to any other
Yes.
conflict that has ever happened. But I was struck in your book with the citizenship aspect in wanting to be a part of a society that protects you and is there for you. And of course, I'm not French, so I don't really have a firm grasp of modern day French politics. But I did get a sense in your book that that there were similarities
Yes.
between then and now with how immigrants are treated.
Yes, but you know the book is built with two Passover nights. One Passover night in 1919, and the other Passover night 100 years later. And it was important for me to have these two dinners, these two evenings, to show that I don't compare, but to show that the questions are always the same. Do we have to live? And it's important because the Passover night, Pesach, is the night when Jews are remembering the, the moment when Moses left from Egypt. So that's why the two dinners are important.
Yeah. Well, on those kind of lines, what lessons are you hoping that people take away from your book?
I simply hope that people have had a literary experience because at first I'm a writer and I want to write literature. So that's my first hope before the question of her lesson. And I also hope that they will They will have also learned things about war, just as I learned, because I'm not an historian, so I learned a lot for writing my book, while writing this book. And but at the end, for me, the most important thing is that we have to not forget what the Holocaust was, because now in France, in the United States, the witnesses are getting older and older. And one day we will live, our children will live in a world without the witnesses. And that's very dangerous, a world without witnesses. That's why we, the third generation, we have a mission, we have a duty, and we have to continue the account and the account of the Holocaust, and we have to be to work for the witnesses.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Anne, this has been such a terrific interview. And thank you so much for your time today. What are you working on next?
You know, I always work about my family. The book before I wrote before the postcard was a book about my great grandmother, Gabrielle, and the book will come out in the USA. I don't know when, but maybe in 1 year or 2 years. And now I'm writing a book about my parents and about my father and their life in France in the 70s.
Wow. All right. Well, I hope that that makes it over here to America because I would like to read that. But
That
that sounds
you will find Miriam, because
oh,
Miriam
nice.
she's also in the story. You will find Gabrielle, because she was very old, and so you, book after book, all the characters are moving.
Yeah, I mean that's so interesting. When I was your blurb when I first introduced you. Claire, your sister, is in
Yes,
the blurb, and I was like, "Oh, she's in the book." Like I know,
yes.
I've yeah. So that's so neat that you get to you get to write about your family, which a fascinating family. So you have lots to write about. Well, and if people want to follow you, are you on social media? How can people get in touch with you? No
Uh,
social media.
I'm not on social media.
Good for you. Good for you.
I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on Instagram. I'm a very old lady from another century. So if you want to contact me, you have to write me letters.
Oh, that's great.
I receive hundreds of letters.
Do you really?
Yes, and I answer to all.
Wow.
Each
That is
week, I spend one morning to answer to all the letters I receive. People write me to the address of my French editor. It's Édition Grasset, 61 Saint-Père Street in Paris, in the 6th arrondissement. And I receive all the letters and I answer with my hand.
oh, that's incredible. You have the perfect writer's life. That's no social media, handwritten letters. Well, Anne, thanks again, so much for
Thanks to
for for
you.
joining me here today. The Postcard by Anne Berest. Go buy a copy. Go check it out from your library. What an incredible, emotional, impactful story. And Anne, thanks so much.
Thank you.